my name is Davina Smith. I'm with the Office of Cannabis Management. As my lovely introducer said, I started about 3 months before the pandemic took place. So I was new to the city, and then 3 months later, we're all told to go home, and we have to figure out how to suddenly do a regulatory and permitting program, all virtual, right? All online, all on Zoom. Not even all of my team had laptops. So it was quite the transition. A little bit about me. I mean, you saw my professional bio. I am someone who kind of grew up in cannabis. Both my parents were involved in it. My mom was a hippie. My dad was sort of a Hell's Angel. My dad was in prison most of my life for drug offenses. So I certainly have firsthand experiences of the war on drugs and kind of how those can impact families and communities. And so I come at this work kind of in a roundabout way. So I have that early experience. I'm amazed that people remember Yahoo back in the day, right, when that was one of the first search engines. So I did work for that, which was interesting. And then I went to law school because I figured, you know what, this is, I didn't see a long-term future as a lead web surfer, and I really thought I wanted to do a lot more with my life. But I also saw it as something that would be like a plumber, right? It would be a trade that would give me a middle-class lifestyle that I could depend on as I went on in my life. And so that's kind of the impetus behind that. I quickly found out that there were a lot of inequities in the law. And I'm sure the speaker after me, the city attorney, will talk about this. But it's I think it burns out a lot of young attorneys who go to law school wanting something that's going to be, to help people, and then you find out you're not able to, right? The legal system is a problem. There's a lot of issues around there. So when this opportunity came to work with the Office of Cannabis Management as its manager, I jumped for it. I was so excited. And so it's been, 3.5 years now, still loving the work. It exhausts me sometimes. Some days I'm just so excited. I feel like I could just bounce off the wall, and I'm really excited to be here with you talking about it. So, have anybody here heard lately about cannabis consumption lounges? Anybody? Yeah? Has anybody, there's a word or two out there? What about, have you heard about like bad things happening in enforcement stuff in cannabis? Anybody? Bad stuff? Okay. Anybody heard about, I'm just trying to see what I might get questions on later on. Anybody heard about expansion of events outside of Cal Expo for cannabis? Did anybody know you could have a cannabis consumption event at Cal Expo? I see a few nods. Okay, great. So there's a lot of things going on out in the cannabis world that we're probably going to talk about. My presentation focuses more on sort of what we do in my office, since this is the City Management Academy. But I'm happy to take questions, and I hope you do have a lot of questions. I'm not afraid of those. We do stakeholder meetings every month where I basically sit there for an hour and I get peppered with questions. Many of them hostile, some of them non-hostile, and I'm ready. So as long as you're not throwing tamales, I am okay. So thank you for that. So first of all, what are we talking about here when we talk about cannabis, right? So I don't know about you, but I grew up hearing a lot of different terms, right? My local favorite from someone I know, their grandfather calls it devil's lettuce. I love that. But what is this and what do we call it? I grew up calling it, dope, grass, weed, pot. When I started going into the law, it was all marijuana, right? It was marijuana offenses, marijuana crimes, marijuana cultivation. And probably in, 2014, 2015, there really became a movement to sort of change the narrative around that. I think there was a lot of recognition that there were some racist and xenophobic tropes around that term. And so pretty much when state law, local law, we all started using the term cannabis, and I'm going to use that term now. It's funny, as I was researching for this, so I found information about that, which is sort of on one side, right, the sort of racist and xenophobic term. But on the other side, it was interesting, from Code Switch, and I don't know how many people are familiar with that podcast, but they talked about that maybe it's not actually a racist, xenophobic term as we thought, which was sort of interesting. So I wanted to present both sides of that kind of issue, my sources, but also to say that we're going to talk about it, cannabis here. If you in your life want to call it grass, if you want to call it weed, we'll know what you're talking about, right? So feel free to use the term that feels most comfortable for you. So what is cannabis, right? It's not quite like porn. It's not like you know it when you see it. There is a legal definition for this that's in the Business and Professions Code for California. It's really obvious, right? It's all parts of the plant Cannabis sativa linnaeus, Cannabis indica, or Cannabis ruderalis, whether growing or not. We all know what that is, right? I have no idea what that is, right? Those are scientific terms for plants. It's not industrial hemp, right? And the difference between cannabis and hemp under the law, it's a legal difference. Hemp has less than 0.3% of THC, which is the psychoactive component of cannabis. So that is hemp. Anything more than 0.3% of THC is cannabis. So it's sort of like a bright light test there. So this is what we're talking about. It's been a long road. So those of you who are older kind of remember back in the day, stuff in the towel under your door so mom and dad wouldn't smell anything, going outside with your friends. Suddenly in 1996, we had Prop 215 that was passed by the voters. That allowed you to possess cannabis if you had a medical marijuana card, and it was basically a defense to prosecution. So you might still get arrested, you might still get a citation, but you could show up to court and you could say, I have a medical marijuana recommendation from a doctor, and I need this for my medical use, and that would be your defense. It was a big step forward at that time. It wasn't enough, right? Because, okay, I can possess this is a defense. How do I get it legally, right? How do I have it? Wait, maybe my medical need isn't what I want it for. Maybe I would just want it because I like to kick back in the evening and get a little bit high, right? So 215 happened. Then in the year 2015, we have MRSA and MCRSA, right? MRSA, yeah, so there's different things. We always called it MRSA, but then the disease MRSA came along, so it was a problem. And then it kind of morphed into something called MCRSA, which was the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, right? Again, that changing of terms. So this was actually 3 different code sections that came together to set up the first regulatory program for medical cannabis. So you may remember back in the day, again, all of a sudden you could go to your county office and get your medical marijuana card, right? And then all of a sudden you had that little laminated card and you could go in to your dispensary, assuming you had one, and you could purchase cannabis. 2016, again, things are changing. There's a voter initiative to create a regulatory system for adult use and medical cannabis. So this did pass the voters. This was where local control became authorized. That was one of the grand compromises here, was that the state had to approve it and the locals had to approve it. And then that was further modified in 2017 with the Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, MCRSA, which again made additional adjustments to that regulatory program, tried to synthesize the medical and adult use together and create further regulations around that. I don't think anybody will really care that much about that, but in case you do, there's a little bit of information. So again, that dual approval is key for cannabis regulatory environments here in California. So you have to have a local permit and you have to have a state permit if you're going to operate. This is different state by state. So in a lot of states, it's very much just a statewide system and locals have no control. In some areas, it's very strong state control and very loose local control. Nevada, for example, it's pretty much all state governed. There's a very minor local approval that you have to get. So pretty much if you get your state license in Nevada, you can get your local license. And that's not the way it is here. Here in the city of Sacramento, you need to get a business operating permit, a BOP, issued by the Office of Cannabis in order to operate a cannabis business along with your state license. So where did we come from, the Office of Cannabis Management? So here in Sacramento, we began trying to start to regulate medical dispensaries as early as 2009. So it was pretty early in the day. What we did between 2010 and 2015 was we asked those pre-existing, what's called legacy businesses who were operating and providing medicinal cannabis to patients to come up, tell us who they were, give us their information, and we put them through a 2-step permitting process. Not everybody made it through that, but those that did, there were about 30 of them. And so by 2015, they had their local permit, and then they could get their state permit. By 2017, we were the Sacramento Office of Cannabis Policy and Enforcement, and we were placed in the city manager's office. We had been under the finance division before. And then in 2019, we had a name change to Office of Cannabis Management. We still do enforcement, but that's not all we do. And so this is sort of an acknowledgement of the greater role that we play. So what do we do, right? I wish we could sit around and do our nails all day, because that would be a lot more relaxing. We do a lot of different things. I think we are the one-stop shop for cannabis here in the city of Sacramento. We do primarily business operating permit reviews and renewals. We have approximately 285-ish businesses that are operating here in the city, so that's more than there are working days in a year. So we have more than one renewal every day that we work. We provide assistance and information on cannabis permitting to the general public, to other city departments, to our elected officials, to other cities, counties, states. We also manage what we call our core program. So these two highlighted items are things I'm really going to dig into later. The core program is our cannabis equity program, something we're really proud of and I'm happy to talk about a little bit further. We also create and modify code with assistance from our colleagues in the city attorney's office. We hold regular stakeholder meetings. We develop and implement policy around cannabis for the city. We manage a grant and loan program, grant applications and reporting. We do enforcement actions on non-compliant business operating permits. We also do logistical support for reconsideration and appeal hearings. And then, of course, we do the regular business stuff of managing procurement, contracts, purchasing, all those sort of HR kind of things that you have to do. So let's kind of dive in first into our cannabis social equity program. The origins of this, again, comes under state law. The California Cannabis Equity Act did authorize local jurisdictions to create programs that focus on cannabis equity issues, those who are most impacted by the war on drugs and disproportionate policing of cannabis crimes in the state. Our program, which is called CORE, the Cannabis Opportunity Reinvestment and Equity Program. I know it doesn't really roll off the tongue, but we call it the CORE program. It was first authorized under a study that was commissioned by the City Council in 2017. So they said, do we have an issue here with disproportionate policing, right? Let's find out. No, I don't think anybody here is going to be surprised. We did. We had an issue with that. Yes. Au contraire. As a result, once that study came out, those findings were discussed by staff, community members, and we created recommendations for an equity program that did go to council that was based upon that study data and input from communities. An example would be, things that we found were like, the study says that, again, this is not going to be a shocker, young black males, right, had most arrests for cannabis in the city of Sacramento, way beyond their population in the city. All right, MAGA mister, you go to the back. No, sorry. So, but one thing that we really talked a lot about back in that period of time was when someone is arrested, right, it doesn't just impact that individual, although of course it does, but it also impacts a spouse, a partner, right? It impacts children, it impacts parents, siblings, right? Even your neighborhood, right? All of a sudden, if you see the men in your neighborhood disappearing, right? If you walk around and you see teenagers pulled over, right, being hassled by cops every single day, that's going to have an impact on you. So that impact is not just on the person who was arrested, for example, right? It has these ripple effects that go out and affect that individual, their family, their greater sort of community family, their neighborhood, and then sort of our society here in Sacramento at large. So for an example of what we did with that was we said, okay, it's not just the person who was arrested who will be available to get benefits under this program. It's also a first-degree family member, okay? Because the kids, the spouse, the parent who was left behind, they had to pick up that slack. They had those impacts as well. So that's sort of an example of what we learned from as the city when we talked to community members and how we instituted that into our program. In 2018, the City Council adopted a resolution creating the CORE program and describing the assistance that would be offered and laying out the categories, 5 classifications of individuals and entities that would be eligible for benefits. And then programming actually began for that program in 2019, and that program is still ongoing. Interestingly enough, it is a pilot program still. So we are, I'm writing the resolution right now to go to council either in October or early November to ask that it be made a permanent program. We don't think this is something, the ills of the war on drugs is not something that's going to be solved in 4 years, right? So we want to continue this program and continue the benefits for folks. So what do you get if you can qualify for the CORE program? Well, we've got about 380 individuals that have qualified so far. And the criteria generally is a cannabis arrest conviction or residing in a low-income household for 5 years in a zip code disproportionately impacted by cannabis policing. What do you get if you're a member of the CORE program? Well, you can get regulatory training and education services for small business and cannabis businesses, right? Grants, free money, a no-interest 6-year term loan. It's a revolving loan, so as people pay back in, we're able to make additional loans. We waive the business operating permit fees, which is a savings of anywhere from $2,000 up to about $25,000, depending upon the type of permit. We provide priority access processing for both conditional use permits and business operating permits. We do pay for expedited plan check review by the building department. We offer networking mixers so that CORE members can meet each other, form bonds, find out what each other are doing. We have started an advertising campaign, I think that's pretty cool, on social media and our Facebook to not only advertise the CORE program itself, but our CORE program participants to talk about their journey, try to get people to think, if you're going to purchase cannabis, think about where you spend your money, right? Support a local CORE business with your cannabis money, not sort of the Walmart of weed, right? And then, of course, CORE members have access to storefront business operating permit opportunities. And what that means is that, as I mentioned earlier, with that two-part application process between 2010 and 2015, there were 30 that made it through of these legacy operators. So what our city council did back in 2021 was they made 10 more permits available to CORE members only. So those folks now are kind of going through that process, and we've had 3 open up. We've got another 2 to 3 opening up in the next, I'd say, week to month. So it's pretty exciting to see that sort of all that work come to fruition. So these are the codes regulating cannabis in our city, right? And again, the Office of Cannabis Management is sort of seen as all things cannabis, but it's actually a lot of us working together throughout the city. Planning in Title 17, they deal with the zoning, right? So cannabis businesses have sensitive uses they have to be a certain distance from, such as schools. Also conditional use permits. So all cannabis businesses in the city of Sacramento have to get a conditional use permit, and that is a discretionary permit that's issued by the city. That deals with the land, the use of the land. Title 15 deals with building and fire requirements. You'll need to have a certificate of occupancy saying that the structure is intended for the use, right? We all remember hearing about the ghost ship fire in Oakland, right? That structure was not intended to host a party and a bunch of people living there. It was a warehouse space. So we want to make sure that all of our buildings are built up with sprinklers and exits and everything appropriate for the use that's going to be used for it. Title 5, it deals with business operating permits, so that's my office, the Office of Cannabis Management. And then Title 3 deals with Revenue Division, which is our business operations tax. So how do you get a permit to operate a cannabis business in the city of Sacramento? First, you got to know what you want to do, right? So there's a lot of different types of cannabis businesses. You can have a nursery, which means you have clones and immature cannabis plants. You can have a cannabis cultivation site where you're growing plants to flower and then collecting the nuggets, right? The buds off of that and curing them, processing them. You can be a distributor, right? So a warehouser, basically transporting and holding. You can be a delivery, right? So a delivery retailer. You can be a manufacturer, and you can be a storefront retailer. So there's a lot of different options that you can have. So you got to figure out what you want to do. There's also a testing lab. That's fairly rare. There's not very many of those in the state. So once you know what you want to do, you have to find a location, right? So you have to look at your zoning, talk to your planning department, talk to your realtor, find a location that will work for that type of business. Then you apply for your discretionary permits for land use under Title 17, so your CUP. You apply for building permits. And once you get that, your certificate of occupancy from the building department. You apply for your BOP from my office. We're sort of a lot of the paperwork. We want to know, do you have your, insurance? Do you have your registration for your delivery vehicle? Do you have everything else you need from these other things? Do you have your CUP that matches with the business type you want to do? Once you have that, you apply for your state license. You can do it at the same time. You want to apply for a BOT certificate, right? A business operations tax certificate, because if we know anything about government, they want their tax. And then once you have both a BOP and a state license, that business can operate. So I kind of already went through this, but I kind of wanted to have this out there for you guys in case you want to study how to get your own cannabis business. Again, planning is interesting because they have pretty much two different types of CUPs, while, as I just mentioned, we have a lot of different types of cannabis uses. So they either do production, which covers cultivation, bless you, cultivation, manufacturing, or distribution, or dispensary, which is the sales component. The CUP is decided either by the Planning and Design Commission or the Zoning Administrator. Planning and Design Commission, of course, is the 9-12 body, 9-11 body that you go in front of. There's usually a 6 to 6-month, 9-month wait to get there. Zoning Administrator is a planning higher level employee who conducts that public hearing, and there's about a 3-month to 4-month wait to get in front of that. So you can tell if you're renting property and trying to get your CUP, you'd much rather do something in front of the Zoning Administrator because you're cutting your time in half, right? Because every month that you're operating without income coming in, that's significant. And of course, the decision of the Planning Commission or the Zoning Administrator can be appealed to the City Council, and you can't move forward if that happens. Certificate of occupancy, again, you're doing your tenant improvements, you're building out, you're putting in all the security requirements, you're putting in your ADA bathrooms, you're putting in all the stuff you need to be legal under our building code. At the very end, you'll get all your final sign-offs from building, and you'll get your certificate of occupancy. Then you come to my office, yay! As you can see, we have a bunch of different types of permits. I do want to kind of talk a little bit about the micro business. People tend to think that's a small business, which would seem to make sense, right? Micro, small, but actually it's 3 or more cannabis activities. So the idea behind that is that it's vertical integration. So you could have a manufacturer, distributor, delivery, all in one premises, all one owner, right? You would submit your BOP application at the same portal that you use to apply for CUPs, building permits, and other city permits. And you do one application for each business type. You get an OP number, which is what my office knows you by. So your OP-00749. So our paperwork requirements, as you can see, a lot of it is about half of it is stuff that we need from other city departments, and the other half is stuff you need to give us. So we need to know what your business structure is. Do you have a corporation or an LLC or some other partnership that is legal to operate here in the state of California? So we need something from the Secretary of State that says that. We need insurance. We need a community relations plan, security plan. So a lot of paperwork stuff. We get all this information, we review it, we let people know if there's missing documents. A lot of times we find people don't have all the requirements in a security plan. Stuff that has to be notarized isn't notarized. The ownership fails to match up on various documents, right? You're saying that here the Secretary of State has you as the sole owner, and over here you're telling us there are 4 owners. Well, which is it, right? We need to know who the owner is and who we're talking to. Sometimes people get insurance quotes rather than insurance policies. So once we think it's pretty much complete, it kind of goes out to the other city departments to make sure they think it's complete. So again, it's not just us, it's really a sort of a team effort. Once we get the okay from these other departments, we actually do ground truthing. So we go out and we walk the premises, we go with the applicant, and we go with the member of the police department that's assigned to us to look at security conditions, and we go with our cannabis code enforcement. We go Wednesday. So this morning I was out there with a bunch of other people. We were doing inspections. Really it's to make sure that everything appears as it is on the map that they give us, right, the site plan. And we want to make sure they have the correct signage. We want to make sure that the correct security things are in place, right, that there's panic alarms and the monitors and the cameras where they need to be. And then there's some possible outcomes, right? Everything could be fine and we can move forward. Or they may need to make corrections, right? Which is going to take additional time, unfortunately money, by the applicant to make those corrections. So once we get the recommendations from Code and PD We again look everything. There is a 3-part review for the BOPs, and that was developed purposefully. It seems cumbersome sometimes, but the idea behind that is to make sure there's no bias, that everything is caught to the extent we can, and that there's no allegations that, you know, I'm being especially friendly to my cousin's friend's sister's boyfriend's business, right? So we have a first level review, then we have a program specialist who does a second level review, and then if that's good, then it gets sent to me and I'm the final review, and I'll sign the permit and send it off if everything looks good. Again, 2 permits, right? Local and state, if that's something that I think is really important to know. And so that's sort of the end of my official presentation, but I'm happy to answer questions and talk. As I said, I know got a little regulatory there for you. I do want to point out here we have our Instagram and our Facebook. We're doing a lot of work in those on our core program and advertising there, so I definitely encourage you to check that out, as well as the sacramentocore.org website. Really excited about that. Okay, bring it. I think I saw you first. Oh, thank you. Thank you.